We finally have the block back from the machine shop. So this cylinder had a lot of damage on the bores. It doesn't have sleeves, so they've bored out the block and put sleeves in. Hopefully back to the original diameter so they'll work with the pistons and rings that I have. I also have the head back, got this reconditioned as well, so they put in new valves, reseated, and did a pressure check on it as well. I also got them to recondition the injectors while they were there, just to be sure they were okay, and a small little bit of work on the front flywheel, or sorry, the front pulley for the water pump. It had a small bit of a groove in it, and that was affecting the seal. So really happy. I'll show you a clip here of it close up. Looks really nice. There's quite a bit of swarf left over, so first job is for us to do a thorough clean of the block, make sure there's no swarf left over, and then we're going to slowly start the rebuild process. Let's begin. So spent a couple of hours just thoroughly cleaning this, getting rid of any of the swarf. I just ran a tap down the holes, make sure that they're all clear. I think we're ready to start assembling. So I'm about to rebuild the bottom section. It's a tricky engine to get sealed properly. There's just so many faces that come together. So first of all, this sits on the chassis, so you have to seal that area. But if you come closer here, I'll show you where the bearings go for each side of the crank. There's just so many faces, it's tricky. So you can see here on the bearing carrier on one side, it's the same to the side. It's actually more complicated to the side. But you can see here, crank goes in here, you put this together. This surface here actually mates with the chassis of the tractor, so there's a rubber seal here, but it relies on everything being squared together. Then you have two different surfaces here that mate onto another plate, and then on top of that comes a plate the right way around here. So another plate goes on top of that, which also then has to be sealed, and then on top of the plate then comes another cover on the very front. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different surfaces that come together to be sealed. So it's not a great job really, and means that it's going to be tricky, and I'm going to have to use lots of gasket sealer on it to try and make sure we seal it as best we can. On the rear side, it's actually even more complicated in my opinion. So again, you have the same type of system. Your cap here, number O-ring that goes around there to try and mate this surface with this surface and this surface with the chassis. And then inside here then is a seal carrier that has a rope seal, and it goes on each side like this. So there's a rope that goes in there against the crank. You have to seal that. This has to seal against it, and then these two parts also need to seal against each other as they come together. So when that comes together, it comes in here, and you seal that against that. So again, you've just got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different surfaces there, all coming together. It's yeah, not a great job really, but we shall do our best with it. So of all those surfaces, the one that's got me a little bit confused is the one between the cap and the block, because I don't think it's sealed properly. There is a gasket for the outer surface, there's a gasket for the block against the chassis, there's a O-ring for the top of the cap, but this surface here in between those is only really sealed by this outer one here. So there's a corner there that everything comes together that It's probably not going to be much, but there could be a little bit of oil that comes out the corner, right? If it makes its way through the inside here, there is a weakness there either side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a tiny bit of Durco, just really to fine film on the ends of those, so that it just negates the risk of the oil coming out there. And I'm going to do the exact same thing here, just ever so slight film. So if you're wondering how these seals work, so it's a rope seal. It sits down in this groove all the way around, and then that mates up against this part of the crank here. And if you look here, there are grooves on the crank. Bend around and show it to you here a little better. They actually make like a thread pattern. So what I'm assuming is that when the engine is spinning, it's drawing any oil that does come down that seal back into the engine as it's rotating around that rope seal. So interesting, a bit different how they used to do it back in the day. I think they used to be made out of asbestos, but I believe they're no longer. The spec calls out for 163 Newton meters for the caps, which is quite a bit. So I'll bring it up maybe in stages. I might go 70, 100, 130, 163. I think of maybe 4 stages. I'm going to focus on the front side of the engine here. So there's a plate that goes on here. We have a gasket to put in between that. So that goes on, but what holds it in place is actually this front cover. But you got to seat each side, and in between putting each of these on, this has got to go on and be sealed. Then this gear on the camshaft has to go on, and another gear here to go connect that to the crank, and then you got to seal the outside again on this side and put on that cover. So it's tricky. I think I'm going to put this on, bolt it in place, pulley on, try and do it reasonably quickly, then take off the bolts, reseal this and tighten up the bolts again, and hopefully it all seals up, but it's complicated. So when it comes to timing these gears, it's pretty straightforward. So there's a single dot that goes on the crankshaft, and those 2 dots there line up. Then there's 2 other dots then on the gear that line up with the camshaft, and they have to go either side of the letter D, like so. So there's a letter D there, and the 2 dots, and it's timed. So I'm going to move on to the other side with the rope seal, which is very tricky. In a nutshell, the rope seal goes in here. There's a procedure to try and seat it down as well as you can. It says to put a tiny little bit of adhesive underneath to stop it rotating when the engine starts first. It actually says not to cut it, but the rope seal and all the ones I've got previously, they're all too long. So they're always longer than they need to be. So you have to cut it. So I'll have to cut it, trim. So seat it in, roll it out, cut it, clamp it on the shaft properly. Let's get started with the Okay, so didn't work out. I think I'm gonna have to do it again. So I don't think I got it in low enough before I put it on. This one's not too bad actually, but in the other one, I've actually, see that to focus here. It's actually gone slightly under. That's no good. As when they come together, I'm going to have a gap like that. So I have spare rope, so I want to do this one again and see how can I get a bit better. So that's as good as I can get it. Second attempt. It's very slightly proud each side, which I think is needed because when it compresses then it'll squash together. And it's seated in all the way around. So hopefully that does it. We'll soon find out. Okay, so the manual calls out for a sequence. It says first of all, nothing's tightened yet, they're just all threaded in. Sequence 1 is to tighten up the hex bolts. And then it says to loosen them 1/2 turn. Now it says to tighten these guys, the hex nuts. So then after that I have to loosen these off 1/2 turn, tighten these down again fully, and then retighten them all together. So it's all in now. So many joints, so many connecting parts. It's definitely a weak point for an oil leak, but we've it done now as best we can, and hopefully that works. Okay, so that's the bottom side of the engine done. I'm going to flip it over now and we'll install the pistons. So we're going to put in the pistons. The first thing I need to check is the gap for the piston rings with the new liners. I need to see if the rings still fit or if they need any adjustment. This engine, there's a scraper, 2 compressions, and then there's another chrome plated compression ring on the top. So I need to check them all, and the spec is between 0.28 and 0.48 millimeters. Oil scraper ring in. I've filed it down ever so slightly, and I've checked now. 0.28 goes in quite easily. 0.3. Struggles. Goes in partially and then it's straight. So we're between 0.28 and 0.3, which is perfect. Expect 0.28 to 0.46. So I'm going to do the same with the other rings and piston number 1, and then we'll be able to put in the piston. first cylinder done. I'll do exactly the same for the other two. That's the other two pistons in. All went fairly smoothly. All the rings had to be adjusted. Thankfully, they're on the lower end of spec, so it's quite easy to open them out a little bit by filing them down slightly. Okay, so I'm preparing to put the block into the chassis here. So I've got a paper gasket here for each side, and I'll use gasket sealer. In here, there's a rubber seal that goes on the block here. It goes down into this groove and down into that hole, and the same here on the other side in that groove there. So I gotta get these in first, then I'm going to put the gasket maker on. I gotta lift the head up, get it over, and get it all bolted in before the gasket maker goes off. So there's quite a few steps involved in it, but it's not too bad once you just take your time. Next job is to put on the head. I'm going to just wipe down the surfaces, degrease them, get the gasket on, pop on the head, and then we'll tighten it all down following the correct sequence. Let's go. So all the bolts are in now. I'm going to start the tightening sequence. So you got to go up 40, 80, 100. I think it goes up to 136 Newton meters. And obviously making sure you're following the right patterns. So the manual has that all laid out. I'll go and do that now. Okay, so I'm just putting on the oil pickup tube. Next up, we're going to put in the rocker arms and the push rods. Push rods in first, put them in the same way to come out, and we'll just oil as I go. So to set these, you need the first cylinder TDC on the compression stroke, and then you can do 1, 2, 3, and then the final one here, all to 0.25 millimeters. Then I get piston number 1, the exhaust stroke, and then I can do the 2 that are left over. So I'll do that now. It's very simple, 0.25 for all of them. next going to pop in the diesel pump. Got a greased bearing here, and there is a little connecting shaft, and it's keyed. It can only go in one way, so once everything else is timed, this will be timed as well, and have a little mark on the outside as well, just to get the pump rotated in the right way. So we'll move on with that. So first is a little spring. Little seal here, very thin layer of sealant on as well. So I move the engine. There we go. That's it. Next, just pop on the diesel filters over here. So next is the water pump. And it has a grommet that goes between the head and the block, which again isn't really a great job because there's a lot coming together. But let's see, a bit of sealant on it. Hopefully that helps. Okay, let's torque that up. Okay, time to put in the clutch and the pressure plate. 3D printed my locator, so hopefully this will help me line it all up. Do it the right way. This is a dual clutch setup, one clutch for the PTO, one for the drive. It has two clutch discs and a clutch plate in between, and then you put the pressure plate on top. So there are 3 springs that go in around the clutch plate. And the clutch plate goes on. Okay, so next clutch disc goes on. Should have line everything up. Okay. all torqued up. Should come out. And go. Okay, so next job, I've got to adjust this guy here. There needs to be 1.8 millimeters between the plate and that screw here. There should be a gap of 1.8 millimeters. So I need to back this guy out, get my feeder gauge in, and set that to 1.8. Okay, just repeat the same now on the other two, and then check and see are they all the same. Okay, we're going to offer up the two halves of the tractor here. This is all about alignment. So trying to get the distance here equal as you're going in, and then also I'll have a flat edge here, and that'll help me understand if each side is level with each other. If it's bowed in the middle, it means they're too high in the middle. If there's a dip, then it's too low down. Okay, I'll go around and add in all the bolts in the bottom, take off the winches, and then add the cover on the top. Okay, so I just jimmy rigged on a lever here, checked it out, both clutches are disengaging, the drive clutch and the PTO clutch, so looks to be good. Okay, I just have a temporary fuel tank set up here. I'm going to bleed it, and I think we're ready to try it out. See if it runs. So bleed sequence on this, you got to get the pump on the cam. So there's pumping first here, then this side of the diesel pump, back of the diesel pump, and then the injectors. So you do all that, should be ready to go. Should also say I've deliberately left the exhaust manifold off so I can see what each cylinder is doing. I'll run it for 5 or 10 minutes if it fires, and once I'm comfortable they're all doing okay, then I'll put the manifold on and run it for a bit longer. A bit of a leak. Thinking about it. I'm still getting a bit of a leak here. Almost. Okay, so I was a bit concerned this first cylinder. It's very, very smoky, but for some reason it just hadn't, maybe there was a bit of air in the line, it actually wasn't firing, it was cold. But they're all firing now in the right order and seems to be going pretty well, so it's a good start. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check it all for oil levels, maybe run it for a few more minutes before I put on the manifold and just make sure everything is looking pretty decent. So yep, brilliant, happy with that, very happy with that. Okay, so just ran it there for about an hour and a half. Seems to run just fine. Only issue I have is that this pulley down here is leaking, so you can see there's a bit of oil here in the bottom. So that's not that hard to get at, not the end of the world. I did get them to make a machine that there was a groove in it, so I may just need to tighten the seal, or maybe it's leaking around the seal, but that's a standard seal, it's easy to get to. But everything else seems to be running really well. I have no smoke issues, holding oil pressure well and everything, so yeah, happy with that. Obviously, you know, need to put it under the proper day's work to see how does it cope, but at a high idle there it went really well, so yeah. That's going to be it now for this for another few months. I'll get back out in the winter time, but right now we got to get some jobs outside. But yeah, success, I think. Looks good. So happy with that.